Thank you, Mr. Dandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the Department of Finance, I'm not sure if you covered this in your testimony, but regarding the age restrictions and the access, as I read here, 8% of applicants received the award for the Cal Grant A or B awards. Are you guys addressing the issue of, I guess, after your for grants outside the age restrictions?
Ian Johnson, Department of Finance. You're correct that you have to apply for an entitlement award either for your first year of college or 1 year removed from college. Beyond that age restriction, there is the Cal Grant Competitive Program, which provides a capped number of slots, 22,500 slots per year.
Right, that's the one where only 8% out of 317,000 people applied for it. So are you looking at increasing funding for that or expanding that in any way?
The administration does not have a proposal at this point to expand the number of slots provided.
Has that been kicked around or debated as a possibility, or is it just absolutely no, or why not?
We're certainly aware that there are a number of, that there's a lot of interest in expanding financial aid in the state. I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a program, as you know, the LAO's handout noted, this is a program that has doubled in cost since 2007-8. As my colleague Mr. Seha mentioned in his opening comments, when we started building the 14-15 budget right off the bat, we had to include $260 million of new general fund spending. So there is a lot of cost pressure associated with this program. And
sorry, what was the cost pressure on that again?
Because it will be introduced in the entitlement program, which, before you talk about expanding eligibility for the program, increases general fund costs by $100 million. And so with all of these sorts of cost pressures on this program, the administration obviously routinely with every budget weighs different priorities for what to be funded, and expansion of this program was not chosen as a priority. Continuing stable funding for it was.
And I guess, as you're saying, it's a balance between the other programs within Cal Grant, and you guys err on the side of then keeping more funding, or proportionally, I guess, more funding for A and B for the or for the age-restricted grants. Is that correct?
I think that's a fair characterization. I guess I would only reword it to say that it's a costly program just to maintain the entitlement that was established back when this program was created in 2001, and there's just simply not a proposal coming forward at this point to further expand that program. This program, even in sort of the economic downturn and the tougher budget years, this program has by and large received very strong support and continues to be one of the most generous financial aid programs in the state.
Yeah. Ms. Fuentes, any comment?
Well, you've hit upon an issue where, in terms of priority, the legislature established a priority in 2000 of high school seniors and 1 year out first as their #1 priority, and then the second priority was community college transfer students who chose to go to a community college first and then transfer to a 4-year institution. And then the last priority were students who didn't meet that criteria, who were older students. And we've seen a tremendous increase in the number of students who are older, who've gone back, who are in need of financial assistance. So, as the Department of Finance indicated, as a matter of policy, the legislature every year has come in and established the priority being high school seniors and community college transfer center students first, and not the older student population, which has now grown to 317,000 students who apply, who we don't have available funding for. We only have 22,500 awards. I'll also tell you, we have a Cal Grant C program, which is a small program in terms of the number of awards. It's around 8,000 awards that are issued every year. And that program also serves primarily community college students, primarily older students. So if you're looking at the issue of workforce development and how to increase the number of individuals that are trained.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Ting? Yes.
Just a couple questions. One question for finance.
Increases. We have not had tuition increases in a number of years, and the program continues to grow. This year specifically, I believe increased participation is due to Last year, we had a large increase in the number of new recipients. Those recipients are now flowing through as renewal recipients. New applicants are kind of staying flat. So it's certainly been both factors that have driven increases in this program.
But I guess prior to our push to kind of increase that population the last 2 years, wouldn't you say prior to that it was really just keeping pace with the fee increases, and frankly it was just another way to fund UC, because rather than us doing our part in funding UC, CSU, and community colleges, we let them increase fees. By increasing fees, this automatically raised the amount in this entitlement program.
Again, I think that it's both factors that have caused this program to grow. There's certainly tuition increases in the past have aided the growth. However, there is no debating that there's been a large increase in the number of recipients as well. That's due to a number of factors of, more students completing the FAFSA, more students for economic reasons being qualified for the program. So again, I think it's certainly both factors.
Great, thank you. In particular regarding Cal Grant B, I've been working on trying to have Cal Grant B really keep pace with many of the costs. When Cal Grant B was first started over 40 years ago, it really was meant to cover, frankly, tuition and basic books, basic scholastic expenses like supplies, things like that. Since then, obviously, the cost of fees as well as supplies has really far outstripped really what is a fairly modest Cal Grant B. Can you help me sort of understand why not augment that, since that's obviously some geared toward the most vulnerable students in the system, and it really hasn't even come close to keeping pace where now barely the amount of Cal Grant B barely even covers books at this point, if it does.
I would kind of go back to the sort of comments that were just made by the LAO, which is that while the Cal Grant program has historically been primarily a tuition coverage program, it's important to keep in mind that the Cal Grant is only one piece of a student's financial aid package, and really it's the only piece that has historically been restricted for just tuition. The Pell Grant Award is not, can help fund those other costs. Institutional aid, depending on how it's structured, can fund cost of attendance. Private scholarships often have a lot of flexibility. Obviously, it's not the most favorable option, but there are also student loans and working that can help to offset those costs of attendance. And so, sort of keeping that in mind, that the Cal Grant is just kind of one piece of a larger financial aid package. I think that the administration just has concerns with expanding any of the ongoing general fund programs and the costs that they incur.
And I totally understand that, can appreciate that. I think that my major concerns, we seem to be having a student debt crisis, not just in California, but really in this country. And that what you said, while there are other options, what we're seeing over and over again is the huge amount of debt that students have to walk out with. And again, the most vulnerable, the lowest income seem to be having the biggest burdens, just given their financial situation. And that's, I think, very, very concerning, that frankly we are setting up students that we're forcing basically their career path based on what they can afford to repay. We're also limiting many of their scholastic options based on what they can afford to pay, and really sort of in breaking with what the idea of our master plan was. It seems like we've frankly severed that contract with the students in California. So I think it's very, very concerning. It's something that I think we need to take very, very seriously, that just because nowadays it's not enough just to get admitted. If some students get admitted and they don't have a strong enough financial aid package, they don't go. They don't go. And I'm not even saying they end up at community colleges. They may not go at all. So that really wasn't what we envisioned when we put together our master plan over 50 years ago. So I think we have to really look back and see how we can recommit ourselves to that promise that we gave students for generations.
Wrong button. I'd like to follow up on that, the point that Mr. Ting made. You know, when I first arrived to Sacramento last year, and you know, I was in the process of learning more about public higher education and the situation in California. It was a surprise to me to see, for example, that according to the LAO, California has the third lowest debt load in the nation in terms of college graduates and their student debt, and that is actually lower than the national average. Is that correct?
That's correct. The average debt at UC and CSU are just shy of $20,000 at UC and $18,500 at CSU, compared to a national average, which is about $24,500 for other publics. If you look at all institutions, including public and private universities, the average is higher. So it's relatively low in California, and that's partly because we do provide significant subsidies to our public segments, which have kept tuition relatively low. At CSU, tuition is below all of the comparison institutions in a group of 15 public institutions. At the community colleges, it's rock bottom nationally, and at UC, excuse me, it's below the average for UC's comparison group of public research institutions. So as a result, students are taking out less debt than the national average.
And so, and you also made the point in your presentation that about half of all California public college students receive a free ride as far as tuition is concerned.
Exactly.
All right. So, you know, it seems to me that I know that the legislature passed the middle class scholarship to address where the debt was hitting the students the hardest, those in the middle class, because it seems like if our lowest income students were receiving the full tuition coverage and one of the nation's most generous entitlement programs in terms of college financial aid, and the wealthy students, presumably, they can pay for the tuition and living expenses through their own means. That it was really the middle class that was hit the hardest. Perhaps, is it fair to say that you know? Because I've been reading the same articles that Mr. Ting has been reading about the skyrocketing student tuition debt. But is it fair to say that in the state of California, the biggest impact has been on the middle class?
Yes, we looked at this last year and saw that for UC students, the net cost that students were paying didn't increase very much throughout the recession while tuition was going up until you got to the income group starting at $110,000. So up to that level, students maintained a pretty constant net cost, small increases. At CSU, the increases hit a little earlier, and that was in the income group starting at $75,000. We're still looking at the recent data that came in for 1 year later, and it looks like the net costs at CSU have gone up again, not so much for UC, but those are the ranges where the impact of tuition increases really had an impact.
All right. And then I want to ask Ms. Fuentes-Michel, this is really the first full school year in which the DREAM Act is being implemented. How is that going, and how can California do better to provide assistance for our DREAM Act students?
Well, I think from our observation, in terms of the process itself, it has been a relatively smooth one in terms of the application. I think the challenges are in the income verification process. of having students and campuses provide timely information in order for students to be packaged in time in order to enroll. We've heard from a number of students that the Cal Grant program, which largely, as you know, affects tuition and fees, has assisted students in meeting their direct costs, but these students do not qualify for federal aid, and typically institutional aid doesn't cover their entire indirect cost of attendance. So there have been many challenges in this regard. We hear from students who can't enroll because of their inadequate financial aid packages. There are a number of groups that are looking at this in terms of foundation assistance, but I think it'll be telling once we get the data in terms of the students who actually enrolled and are paid, who actually was able to attend as a result of the California DREAM Act. But I know personally from attending a number of outreach events across the state that it has been a sea change, that these students are very meritorious in terms of their grade point averages, that they're very deserving, and that it really has made a tremendous difference for those who have received both Cal Grant aid, institutional aid, and private support.
Have you been confronting any unique challenges in outreach to the Dreamers and in terms of educating and getting them to apply for financial aid?
Well, I think the initial challenge is that the administration, the federal government, introduced the DACA process, the Deferred Action for Child Arrivals, during the initial year of the DREAM Act application. And so there was some confusion about what the California DREAM Act was and what DACA represented. And so the Commission staff, in partnership with a variety of groups, developed materials and also training through our webinars to communicate what the California DREAM Act was, what it provided, what was required of students, and had to do a lot of training of financial aid administrators and staff about what not only the process was, but what was going to be required of students once they were eligible. And then in terms of the immigration side of this, ensuring that those processes were followed in terms of the affidavit that students had to complete. We've worked very closely with immigration groups that are counseling students in terms of DACA, because when students come forward, the concern is, where is the data going? How is it protected? And there have been a number of conversations of, next steps in terms of meeting their obligation to meet all of the requirements of the Cal Grant program.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Mr. King.
Just a follow-up. I know the LAO, you mentioned the net costs. Did you look at also the potential increase in costs due to students having to take longer to finish, or is that not actually true, where students traditionally been finishing the same amount of time, or is there just more media about the fact that it seems like students are taking longer and longer to finish school?
We were looking just at the annual cost, so we did not take that into consideration. The universities have just submitted some performance reports, the first in a series of annual performance reports, so we'll be able to start tracking completion rates and time to degree a little more closely.
Great. And if you could maybe share with us that information based on how long it's taking, because I know a lot of us are looking at these as if they're 4 or 4.5 year numbers, but maybe they're more 5.5 year numbers.
Yes, the feds typically measure graduation rates now for universities as 6-year graduation rates.
Assemblymember Ting, I'd add one additional thing. I think in terms of your concern about cost, I know that when you're looking at the Cal Grant B Award, Access Award, and trying to expand that award, the size of the award, the Commission has really the viewpoint that by increasing the size of the award, you will improve time to degree, particularly for those community college students who are not receiving more funding. And we would like to see policies put in place that would encourage more full-timeness of students. I know in the student success area that's been a focus, but I think when you look at cost, you need to look at that particular issue, because longer the students stay in school, as you know, the more debt they may incur, deferral of income. And I think that investment in those particular students would be helpful. I think it's one of the reasons why we're encouraged and promoting more students completing the FAFSA. I think that's essential. I know in the Assembly Higher Education Committee there has been conversations about that. The chair is very interested in promoting policies that do that. I think to the issue of the DREAM Act, the concerns in terms of now that we have a FAFSA and we have a DREAM Act application, at a local community college, students have options in terms of identifying themselves and applying for aid, and the processes have now been streamlined. So we would like to see more students being encouraged to fill out the FAFSA at the community college level. We think that will bring in more federal aid, and then we will also be encouraging students to attend school. And now with the economy improving and your consideration of enrollment increases, there is an opportunity here to allow students to attend more full-time, to get the assistance they need, and to bring federal monies in. And we're very much interested in working with you to do that.
Mr. Chairman, another comment on that. Research certainly backs up what Ms. Fuentes-Michel said about if students receive sufficient aid so that they can reduce their work hours, they're more likely to complete timely. But another thing that the segments have found as they increase tuition is that students tend to take more units because there's some pressure for them to get out more quickly as tuition is going up. So it's likely, and I think we've seen this in UC's numbers, that the 4-year and 5-year and 6-year graduation rates have actually been going up as tuition has been increasing.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentations. Next, we would like to invite our second panel, Deborah Cochran from the Institute for College Access and Success, Tamika Butler from Young Invincibles, Orville Jackson from Education Trust West, and Christina Gonzalez, student from Sierra College.
Really?
Welcome. Why don't we start with you, Ms. Cochran?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for inviting me to join you today. I'm Debbie Cochran with the Institute for College Access and Success, or known as TICAS. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy organization based in Oakland, and our mission is to improve educational opportunity and outcomes both nationally and in the state of California so that more students complete meaningful post-secondary credentials without burdensome debt. As an organization, we focus on financial aid because it's crucial to access and success. Students who believe that financial aid is available are more likely to apply to college. How much financial aid they're offered influences which college they choose and whether they attend full-time or part-time. Once enrolled, financial aid can help students limit their work hours so they can spend enough time studying to pass their classes, stay in school, and make steady progress towards a degree, as we were just hearing about. And even after they graduate, the amount of debt that they have and their ability to repay that debt affects what kind of job they take, when or whether they start a family, buy a house, or start a business. Increasingly, all of these aspects of college costs and financial aid are boiled down to one central question: whether college is affordable. But what does it mean to be affordable? Too often, affordable is assumed to mean low cost. But even something with low cost can be unaffordable to someone with few resources and even jeopardize their ability to get their basic needs met, like food and shelter. Whereas something with a far greater price tag might be manageable for someone with more resources. So today I'll discuss some new perspectives on college costs and affordability, along with policy recommendations for the Budget Subcommittee to consider. The document I've shared with you today, entitled College Costs and Affordability in California, includes net prices for federal aid recipients at California's public colleges. Net price, as we've just heard, is the total cost of college, including not just tuition, but also textbooks, transportation, and living expenses, minus all the types of grant aid that students might receive: federal, state, institutional grant aid, and also scholarships, anything that students don't have to repay. Only data for the lowest income students at the community college is available, unfortunately, because so few community college students with family incomes above $30,000 receive any financial aid, any federal aid, excuse me. what the chart on this table shows is that for the University of California and the California State University, where we have data across income groups, the net price of college increases with family incomes. For instance, at UC, the net price for 1 year of college starts at about $8,800 for students from families with incomes of $30,000 or less, and reaches up to $28,000 for students from families with incomes above $110,000. At CSU, the net cost of college ranges from $6,600 to about $20,000, depending on family income. So while net price is a much better gauge of what students are paying for college than looking at tuition alone or the total published cost of going to college, it's not the same as looking at college affordability. Net price tells you what students and their families actually pay, but it doesn't tell you anything about whether they can afford to pay it. In other words, college affordability isn't about making sure the dollar amount students are being asked to cover is as low as possible. It's about whether the dollar amount that students are asked to cover is manageable given their resources. So comparing students' net costs to their family incomes gives a sense of how manageable those net costs are. Troublingly, we see the opposite pattern here. We see that the net cost of college represents the largest share of family income for the lowest income families, and the smallest share of family income for the highest income families. So while that $8,800 cost for UC may look like a relative bargain, it represents an expectation that families with incomes of up to just $30,000 spend almost 2/3 of their entire discretionary income paying for college. This is just for 1 year. For the highest income group, their cost of $28,000 may look very high, relatively speaking, but it represents a much smaller, albeit still significant, 21% of their discretionary income. Indeed, from an affordability standpoint, the cost of UC for higher income families is more affordable than the cost of community college is for the lowest income families. As I mentioned previously, the data we have on net prices for students who received federal aid, but these net prices do take all types of grants into account. Many of the students in the bottom two income groups, though far from all of them, receive state Cal Grants and most likely Cal Grant B awards. In 2014-15, Cal Grant B will be available to students with family incomes of up to $45,900 for a family of 4, and provides recipients with up to 3 years of tuition assistance and up to 4 years of an access award to cover other non-tuition expenses. Our analyses have shown that the value of this access award has dwindled so much over time that it now holds just 1/4 of the value it did previously. In large part because of this, our analyses have also found that our lowest income Cal Grant recipients in the state get grants that are significantly smaller than the grants that higher income recipients get. Over the past year, there's been unprecedented attention to the need to improve Cal Grant B, including legislation authored by Mr. Ting. Most Cal Grant B recipients have family incomes below $30,000, the group our analysis shows to face the greatest affordability challenges. However, despite widespread support, we have yet to see any such proposals implemented, in large part due to their cost. In contrast, the most recent new investments in college financial aid focus on bringing the cost down for the upper middle and higher income families, where the data shows college affordability to be most manageable. To target the greatest affordability challenges in the state, then, we must improve the Cal Grant B and help more eligible students receive grants. We offer 3 specific recommendations. First, increase the Cal Grant B Access Award, which helped low-income students limit their work hours and focus on their studies. This stipend was $900 in 1969, the year of its inception. Since 2012-13, after the award was reduced by 5%, it's been just $1,473, again, 1/4 the purchasing power of the original award. Our second recommendation is to serve more Cal Grant eligible students. At the community colleges, which enroll 2/3 of the state's undergraduate students, just 16% of the lowest income aid applicants receive Cal Grants. 16%. One of the primary reasons for this is the grossly insufficient number of competitive awards available, 22,500 each year of competitive awards. In the current year, there were 16 eligible applicants for every authorized award. The hundreds of thousands of eligible students turned away from this program have an average family income below $21,000 for a family size of 3. Our third recommendation is to include tuition awards for first-year Cal Grant B recipients. This would enable low-income students to choose the college that's right for them. Through Cal Grant A, the state already provides 4 years of tuition and fee support. But the lowest income students who receive Cal Grant B don't get tuition and fee support until their second year of college. This works to steer Cal Grant B recipients away from four-year colleges where they're most likely to complete a degree. These 3 recommendations have been endorsed by a wide range of organizations representing students, civil rights, social justice, business communities. Even the Assembly Speaker and Budget Chair also recently incorporated all 3 of these Cal Grant recommendations into their blueprint for a responsible budget in December. These reforms may not be low cost, but they are affordable and within reach if the legislature chooses to make college affordability a priority. Thank you.